Hi everybody, it's Harvard lawyer Lee. Well, in her appeal brief, Amber Heard is making an argument I just could not believe when I read it. She's blaming the state of Virginia for the fact that she lost the trial. Here's her argument. She argues that she was unable to get witnesses to come to a backwater place like Virginia who supported her side of the case. Johnny Depp was able to get people to travel all the way to that God-forsaken place called Virginia because he was a movie star. Let's unpack that because that is not a good legal argument. And what I want to do is start with 1 minute of explanation about the legal side of this so you can at least understand the lay of the land. What are we talking about here? The reason that Amber Heard brought this issue up at all is because the case was filed in Virginia and she argued a legal doctrine called forum nonconveniens. Sounds technical. Remember, I'm doing this in 1 minute, so it's not going to be. I'll explain it quickly. Forum is the place where your case is filed, not, convenience, convenient. All she's saying, Virginia was an inconvenient forum. In fact, she made this statement, Virginia was a completely inconvenient forum. So that's her whole argument. It was inconvenient for us to be in Virginia. What Amber's asking the court to do is to dismiss the case without prejudice. What that means is she's asking the court to dismiss it, but Johnny could go out to California and file. Why was the case in Virginia? The answer is that the court, Judge Ascarati, found that the Washington Post op-ed that Amber Heard wrote was uploaded to the internet in the state of Virginia. And she said the moment when it was uploaded, that's when it was published, and therefore there's jurisdiction. Now, Amber Heard argues it shouldn't really be the moment when it gets uploaded. It should be either the moment when someone reads it and it becomes defamation because someone's heard it, or the jurisdiction should be the location where the person who was defamed received the most injuries. And that would, in this case, be where Johnny Depp lives, California. There's a question of law there as to where the jurisdiction should be, but frankly, I see it as extra places. I don't see how the court ignores the fact that the actual article was uploaded in the state of Virginia. To me, that seems like at least one place where jurisdiction ought to attach. There should be jurisdiction in Virginia just for that. But it's where Amber takes this argument that really matters here, because what she says is because it was filed in Virginia and you thought, court, that there was jurisdiction here, you didn't consider that argument I made about forum nonconvenience. And if you had, you would have realized that Virginia was just not convenient. California would have been way better as a jurisdiction. And there are several problems with that argument. The first is the assumption that, in fact, California would be better than Virginia, because California really did not have a huge connection to the case. There were clearly incidents that happened in California, don't get me wrong. But remember, too, there was a very long series of serious events that happened in Australia. There was a long fight. Johnny Depp's fingertip was severed there. Amber claimed SV with a bottle, if you'll recall. Then there were incidents in Europe. You'll remember she claimed to have received bruises there on her back, on her face, that didn't show up in photographs. You will also remember there were alleged incidents in the UK. There were alleged incidents on Johnny Depp's Caribbean island. So all over the world is the real jurisdiction for the events that happened here. And the witnesses, frankly, reflected that. You had witnesses who came or testified from Australia, from the UK, from the Caribbean island, and were from all over the world. The fact that some of the witnesses lived in California is not enough to overcome the fact that many of them did not. The second reason that Amber's argument just does not hold water is because she's arguing that she could not get witnesses to come. The same procedure was available to both Johnny and to Amber. Both of them could take a subpoena from the Virginia court and domesticate it, it's called, in another state around the country. Now, that's a pain in the neck to do. I'm telling you, it's expensive to do too, but it can be done. If you take a subpoena from one state and you domesticate it in another, you can't make the person from that state come all the way to the other state, but you can take their video deposition. Johnny Depp had to go through the exact same issues that she did. And that's the third problem with her argument, is that whatever effect there was of the fact that they were in Virginia instead of California also impacted Johnny Depp, because he too had to use that procedure every time he got a witness to testify, every time he got a deposition. And the fourth issue with Amber's argument is that she's blaming everything on the location of the case, when in fact it's far more likely that the problem with getting her witnesses there was related to what she wanted them to say or with what they believed to be the truth. For example, Amber Heard makes these statements. She says Heard was unable to subpoena any witnesses for the 6-week trial and was forced to rely almost exclusively on deposition designations. What that means is she was forced to play the videotape, not all of it, but just parts of the videotape, to the jury. Both Johnny Depp and Amber Heard did that. She also said the only live fact witness Heard was able to call in her defense was her own sister. But the question arises then, whose fault is that? Why is that? Is that because the case was in Virginia, or is that because, in truth, the witnesses didn't really want to come on Amber's behalf? And here's another statement she makes. Depp, who has considerable resources from his decades as a movie star, was able to call more than 15 live fact witnesses who voluntarily traveled to Virginia. The problem with that argument is that the witnesses who traveled to Virginia came there because they believed in what Depp was saying. They came there because they wanted to testify on his behalf, and they believed he was correct in what they were going to testify about. There was just as much reason for Amber's witnesses to do that if they believed what she was going to testify about. And the argument that Johnny Depp had resources from being a movie star doesn't explain why people would go out of their way to come testify for him. The fact that you are a movie star doesn't necessarily mean anything, as is shown by the fact that Amber Heard is a movie star and people would not come and testify on her behalf. You may remember at one point her co-star James Franco was supposed to come. Elon Musk was reported to be coming. Neither one of those witnesses came. And there's no reason to believe it was because the state of Virginia was where the case was held. It's much more likely that they didn't want to come, that they didn't want to be involved, that they didn't feel comfortable with what they were being asked to testify about, or that they felt like the cross-examination would be particularly difficult. Amber's argument also overlooks the fact that while Johnny Depp may have been a movie star, Amber Heard had unusual resources of her own. Not only has she appeared in movies herself, she also had been named the world's most beautiful face in 2016. You could argue that she had just as much of an unfair advantage because of that as Johnny Depp did because he had a history of being a movie star. Neither one of those facts is relevant to why the witnesses came. It does not specifically tell us why those witnesses came to trial. And then finally, Amber argues that she was prevented from responding as Depp shifted his case. Depp was able to redirect witnesses and call new, previously undisclosed witnesses in rebuttal. Heard, on the other hand, had to rely on video deposition testimony. Again, that completely ignores the fact that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had the same ability to convince witnesses to come to Virginia. That wasn't something that was uniquely in his possession. And the fact that he was more successful at it may speak more to whether or not they believed in his cause than to whether or not the case was located in Virginia. It was just as inconvenient for someone who knew Johnny Depp to come to Virginia. So if you're interested in learning more about what's happening with the case, about what's happening with the appeal, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.